You are listening to episode 9 of the Entrepreneur Happy Hour podcast. Our guest is Jena Rodriguez. On to the episode. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Happy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Denise. This podcast is for entrepreneurs. Whether you're just getting started or working your business part-time or just looking for some inspiration, each episode you will hear the incredible stories of entrepreneurs from around the world. These entrepreneurs are subject matter experts in their niche. Want to show off your fan status? Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you can be one of the first to listen to my latest episode, which starts right now. So grab your favorite beverage and let's talk about business. My guest today is Jena Rodriguez. She is a transformational mentor and a growth strategist. And she can help you get your brave on. And she's going to tell us about that today. Jena, how are you doing, my friend?
I am amazing. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so good to see you again.
It is so good to see you
happy
too.
Hour.
Yes, look, it's 5:00 somewhere, right?
Yeah, we're a little on the early part of the day, but we can party with the five o'clockers.
Yes. I saw a meme, and as we're recording this, we're still in the COVID-19 pandemic, and kind of staying at home, safer at home, whatever the order is by our state and the area that we live in. But I've seen several memes that say, in quarantine, it's always happy hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So that has been interesting. The number of people that are kind of, enjoying happy hour all throughout the day as they deal with the different stresses that they now have.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we are definitely all picking our coping mechanisms right now.
Yes. So
sure.
speaking of that, and we can get to later how you're kind of handling this newness of, because it's still new. We're still adjusting to this pandemic and dealing with our businesses. But I want you to first share your story. How did this come about for you, and how long you've been in business? What made you get started? Like, what was the need you were trying to address? And just kind of share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, I'll do my best to do the short version. It's a lot of different iterations. I've been an entrepreneur now for 14 years. But again, the business iterations have changed, have evolved. And before that, I was in corporate America as a controller and consultant. And then before that, I was in like fashion design and makeup artistry and the creative fields and marketing and, things like that. So I have a lot of multi-passionate directions in my life, which I think actually helps me now be more well-rounded and serve people in a kind of a holistic way, because I've done a lot of different, I've seen a lot of different situations and circumstances and scenarios. So personally though, and what brought me to transformational work is I've been on a journey of my own personal development and transformational work since I was a teenager, which was what's the word? I guess spearheaded because of, some definite adversity and hardships. And, the first one being my parents got divorced at 8, and then right after my mom chose a boyfriend that was physically abusive to her and a drug addict and alcoholic. And so the domestic violence was in our household for 5 years, and I moved out at 14. And I couldn't be with that anymore. And then there was a lot of other survival situations that I went into, and, and living on, food stamps at times, and not knowing where rent's going to come from, and just all of those kind of hardships that I know a lot of people might be going through right now, actually. but from that, it became like, there's got to be a better way. And that moved me into a lot of knowledge seeking, a lot of like, how can I change my life, and how can I do it differently? How can I, I don't like that. So what are my options? How do I do it differently? So I started studying a lot, reading a lot. And then I would jump in, as in the last like 10, 15 years, I invested a lot in myself, and in mentors and programs, and transformational work, and now I get to metabolize all that I've learned and all that I've experienced, and I'm really good at pretty good at identifying patterns, and so as a strategist, I've been a business strategist obviously for many years, but now I'm really wanting to, what I've found in business strategy and working with entrepreneurs is that, which I still work with a lot of, is that it's like 10% strategy, it's 90% emotional intelligence and behavior and mindset. And so that's what I'm leading with now. Even if you want support around your growth and your business and such, that's great. But how you're leading yourself is what's really going to make the difference. It's gonna be the make it or break it conversation. And so that's really, and I mean, and there's other, ups and downs, and failed business. The first business failed and had to file bankruptcy. I mean, I've gone through a lot of, hills and valleys for sure. And what I have discovered and loved about my journey is that, number one, I'm the guinea pig. I will run through the fire first. I'm the brave master. I recently said, I guess I'm the OG brave master. And what brave really became for me is, and what I identified in all of my adversity and challenge, is that I moved through things bravely. I just found the courage to say what I needed, do what I had to, show up for what I needed to show up, get the job, whatever it is, to move my life forward. And there's been different phases and evolution of brave for me. And brave now means something much deeper, versus like just showing up through and, taking action through fear, which is part of it. But it's really about facing yourself. It's about owning your stuff. It's about being real with yourself, and being truthful, and finding that true part of you, and outsmarting the ego. So I talk a lot about ego, and a lot about our small story, and our false self, and being able to strategically and practically identify those things is kind of my toolbox, my way of approaching it. I try to give people pretty practical tools to manage this complex mind per se. But so brave, and being a brave master and getting your brave on, is really about personal ownership. It's about facing yourself. It's about going inward. And I think what we're in right now is the biggest opportunity to look inward. And I'm doing the work along with everyone else. You're either running from the work, you're either running from the ability to face all of the feelings that you're feeling, and the stresses you got, and the triggers you've got, and all that, and you're just like, I'm good, I don't know what your problem is, right? Or you're diving into the middle of them and becoming something so much more powerful and so much more resilient on the other side of this. So so that's what brave means. That's what brave masters. I was just, the reason that name came to me was I was calling my clients brave masters. I was like, you're a brave master. This entrepreneurship's not the easy way, it's the brave way, right? But more importantly, a conscious human being, being a conscious human being, is the brave way. And that's really what it's become. It's evolved to, it's not just about entrepreneurship, which I love entrepreneurship because I am one. However, I feel like my goal in life is to help people, number one, become the most conscious part of themselves, right? And bring them from above the line of unconscious to conscious. And because inside of consciousness, we get to have more freedom of choice. There's more freedom in there, even though it may look more painful to be more conscious. But I'm like, bring it on. Let's get our brave, right? So
Yes.
that's where that all kind of ties together.
So, tell me this: what made you kind of go with mentor and strategist as opposed to coach or consultant? And I'm asking that question because a lot of my listeners um, have expressed the fact that, you know, some people call themselves coaches and some people do this and not necessarily understanding the difference. So can you share with the listeners why mentor and strategist
Yeah.
as opposed to coach? And we're not saying that coach is something negative. I'm just wanting to find
I've
out
been them
a
all.
little more about
Yeah.
what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Number one, I've called myself all of it, and I still basically call myself all of it. And I think, one thing I'm always saying is that words have definitions, but each of us give it the meaning, right? So if you're looking at, do I call myself a coach? Do I call myself a consultant and mentor, whatever, strategist, all those titles, right? They really don't mean anything other than what we say they mean. However, so therefore I've defined mine. And for me, a lot of people call me a coach. I still resonate with that. And for me, coaching is not about doing it for you. It's kind of like I'm guiding you to your best potential, and letting you, kind of be in that space, like cheerleading you through it, and giving you guidance. And a consultant for me is a bit more training, doing for you, or solving the problem. And I've been that. I do that with corporate clients now. And part of it is our marketplace resonates with different words, right? It's
Right.
kind of like, you can call it what you want. I'm just here to give you the result that you're buying or that you're paying for. Mentor for me, I just felt like, and that really was probably in the last year I started using the word mentor, because I do feel like where I do my best work is helping people, I'm more of that sounding board. I'm more of that, you're in the jar, you can't read your label on the outside of your jar. And so being the mentor, I can give you the reflection that you need. I can give you the insight that you need. I can show you the patterns that you can't see, and mentor you through your options and your guidance, but help you find your own answers. Right. And so so again, it's just kind of, I used coach and consultant for years, and I was like, I want something else. So I was like, time for a change, right? And transformational is definitely what I'm up to. It's what I'm all about, is helping people transform, who they're being and what they were to something that they want to become, and creating that opportunity for choice and change. And strategist, I'm very systematic. And so my brain works, I'm 50-50. I'm, like I said, I used to be a makeup artist and fashion design. And so the creativity is always there, but then my linear, left brain, strategy, systems, numbers. I mean, I used to be a controller. So I like both those dualities. So I do like to be the strategist inside of the mentoring. So I have I'm creator of the 14 ego tricks. I'm the creator of the 14 egoic archetypes. I have a detachment method that's 7 steps, so strategy comes to me really naturally. And I think people resonate with how, right? Like step by step, give me the steps. And so just part of my gift, I guess, and other people have it as well, is I like to take things that are kind of esoteric and intangible, such as personal development, and then put a strategy around it so people can have that practical tool, step by step, and systematic way of kind of raising their consciousness and their emotional intelligence. So yeah, it just comes naturally to me. I feel like part of my design is strategy and like helping people make sense of things in a logical, simple way, simplicity. But at the same time, I'm very, I think what would I call the mentorship? I think it's just about being in the moment and receiving, the kind of the God-given message that you deserve, and this is for you, and then you go do what is right for you inside of that. So it's more of that guidance, and yet I love tools, right? So I bridge
Yeah.
those together, and here we are.
That's
Call me a
great.
mess, I don't know.
No, no, no. That's great. So I was on a conference call yesterday, and we're building a training program for coaches.
Yeah.
And it got towards the end of the call, and I only had a little bit of time to deliver on what I was supposed to deliver on when we were going through, kind of so that we can explain to these coaches that we're training the difference between coaching and therapy, coaching and consulting, just so that they know, because in the context that we're doing this, not only is that language important, but it's helpful to frame that, just
Right.
so that we don't get it, just so that clients, or they understand and know what they're getting, right? And
Yeah.
so when it came my time to deliver my part, and I only had a few minutes, like you said about the strategy, that kind of comes to me, the steps. I'm also visual. I'm a creative
Right.
person.
Me too.
And the simplest thing that came to me with this was thinking about a car, right?
Hmm.
Thinking about a car. So if I need therapy and I'm thinking about a car, that therapist is like the mechanic
Right.
doing the work, that helping the car to get better. That's what therapy is like. Um, when I have a mentor, that person sits in the seat next to me, kind of like the driver's license test, right? And they like help me, to
Yes.
like, oh, you're doing it, but they've got this experience. They're so good at driving that they can teach someone else how to drive.
Right. Right.
And then the consultant is more of a chauffeur, right?
Mm.
Like, I know how to drive, but since I'm able to, let me just get you to drive me around.
Right. Right.
And then coaching would be more of the GPS, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know my destination, I plug it in, but I don't
Yeah.
know how to get there. So
Right.
you're my turn by turn navigation to get me to the end point. So
What's a strategist?
a strategist would be, I don't know, maybe I hadn't thought about that one, because in the context that we were doing.
I
So
know.
you'll have to help me come up
I
with that.
well, yeah. At first, I was like, maybe that's the GPS. When you first said coach, I was like, it's the guy in the back seat going, "Come on." No, I'm kidding. But yeah, where would the strategist be? Maybe the
Because
strategist could be the GPS, because you plug in the desired result, and then it's step by step, and then maybe the GPS is the strategy,
strategy, yes,
and then the coach is the
the
voice.
voice.
I don't know.
That's it. That's
Right?
it.
Because I coach people through the strategy, right? So
Yes,
maybe the GPS itself, plugging in the data, right, is the
yes.
strategist, but the voice of the GPS,
GPS.
guiding you along the way, is
And
the
and
coach.
pulling out what's already there, right? That's
Please
the coach.
recalibrate. Please recalibrate. So maybe
Rerouting.
rerouting. We're rerouting. That's the coach. The coach is the voice of the GPS.
That's
So
great.
that's
That's
great. I
great.
love the car analogy. I like visual things as well, so it's pretty cool.
That's great. I love the work that you're doing, and to see you on social media and the people that you're helping. What would be your advice to an entrepreneur that's dealing with this particular time and trying to figure out how to show up for their people? What advice would you give to be able to show up, not just now, but just as tough times come, right? Because we all have individual tough times in our life. What
Yeah.
would be your advice for that person to show up for their people when times are challenging?
I think there's a combination of transparency, authenticity, and leadership. And I think how that's done, of course, as a mentor, I'm like, what's right for you will be different than what's maybe right for me or someone else. And I think, however, I think it is like, have a point of view and have, um, or be willing to be transparent about what you're going through, because I think leadership is not by not being a dictator and saying, this is what you need to do all the time. It's about showing them the way and being the example of what you're saying to do. So one of the way I show up is I'm an open book. I'm transparent. I'm honest that, 2 days ago I was crying, I'm feeling the heaviness, I'm feeling the stress and the sadness. And at the same time, I have the tools to process myself through it. That's what I'm trying to give, is like, I've got tools that help you process that stress, that process that emotional roller coaster that we're all on. But I think ignoring that you're on an emotional roller coaster, I think is potentially a disservice to people. Now, that's my leadership style. Maybe your leadership style isn't that. But I think for anyone, this is not a time to contract. It is a time, I believe, to go inward, as I mentioned kind of in the beginning, is to take the time and space to become more of who you are meant to become, like do the inner work, right? I did a quote post where I was like, this is great. I'm glad you're spring cleaning your closets and your garages and your cabinets. However, are you spring cleaning you? Are you taking inventory of what's going on right now? What are you capable of? What are you triggered by? What is coming up? I mean, all of our old stories are totally getting triggered, whether it's inside of our behaviors around food, or our behaviors around action and work and hustle, or our behaviors around relationship, right? Everything's getting triggered. And if we're just going to move through this like, oh, no big deal, I'm fine, this isn't phasing me, I would take a deeper look. And I'm not saying you need to struggle through this. That's not what I'm saying. But I do feel like what I'm looking for in leadership is some sense of transparency, and authenticity, and just realness. Just be real. Just be a human being right now. And so whether you are called, I think it's a matter of following your intuition. And I know that can be a hard thing, especially if you're completely consumed by ego. Like if your loudest voice is egoic versus higher self and like inspired action, you're going to probably behave and respond to fear, and respond to, I look like crap on video, so I'm not going to show up today, or nobody wants to hear from me. Those are all egoic stories, right? And so I think if you are called, if your work in the world, no matter what it is still important to you, then it's important to someone else, and it can serve someone else. So show up, right? And it can be like, get busy on, posting your social media, or show up on a live, or just reach out to 60 people privately and say hello and how are you, like whatever it means to you to show up, whatever it means to you to be a self-lead and be a leader, I think is what's most important right now. And some days I don't want to show up, like I just want to go get quiet. And I also think there's space for that. I think there's space for us to do the kind of get quiet and be on our own. I mean, there's mornings where, I do a lot of meditation. I do recommend that for everyone. And I know some people are like, oh, I can't do that. My mind races. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's the problem. If you don't meditate, the mind doesn't ever stop. So, so it's another tool. It's another way to access the creativity, the inspiration, the rightness of your next move, is to get quiet enough to hear it. And one of the simplest things you can do, and what I've learned by other mentors, is just stop and ask yourself, what's my next step? What's my next step? And then just do it. Just take the next step. And if it's right to this morning for me, then one of my next step is wake up, get dressed, get my hair done. I have a podcast at 8:45, that's my next step. Just show up for this and be here and be present. And then what else is on my calendar? And if there's nothing on my calendar, which sometimes can get people in a little trouble, because then they have this white space, they have this space to deal with, or they think they have a whole lot of time right now. And I also caution people to fill up that time with busy work, because that's also an avoidance tactic. You gotta just kind of make sure that's not what's going on. But when you have that white space, ask yourself, like ask the universe. I subscribe to Gus. My belief is in God, universe, source, and just, ask for the guidance. He's there to mentor just as well, so that's my advice, is don't shrink, but having quiet time and working through your own emotions and sadness is perfectly fine. That's not shrinking, that's taking ownership of where you are. And then maybe the next day you can show up and express your story and speak to it, right? So hopefully that answers your question. It's just a matter of, I think it's not about contraction, it's about expansion. And so do things that expand you. That's what I would recommend.
Yes, that's really good. Well, one thing I wanted to make sure that I asked you, a very essential question. If you had to do this all over again, what would you do differently?
Um, my journey, you mean?
Your
Or
journey, like how you got to where you are today.
yeah. I would probably have to be cliche and say I wouldn't change a thing because I think everything is perfection. I think everything is on purpose to teach us what we need to teach. And I think, like, right now, you get to choose your experience always of life. And so I've chosen my experience all the way along, whether I liked it or not. I may have unconsciously chosen experience that was not so pleasant back in my early years. And then later, as I became more conscious, I started to choose the experience and live life accordingly. And so you get to choose your experience of what's happening right now and whatever happens next and all of that. And that's going to make you feel best. And so I also believe that what I've always gone through, the things that I've experienced and created and been a part of and been witness to, has been preparation for the next thing, right? The next me. And so if I took all of that away, when am I going to learn the lesson? It's kind of like, I got to move through the lesson. So, like, pay attention, like, open up for the lesson. And so I don't live in regrets, but I think that comes when you take full personal ownership of your life, which I think is fundamental. And also forgive yourself, right? Forgive yourself for things that you would not choose today. It's like, if you look back, and there's plenty of things I wouldn't say yes to that from this vantage point, but I can't get to this vantage point without that contrast, without that knowingness. So did I choose things that I wouldn't do today? Absolutely. And I wouldn't change it, because then who would I be today if I didn't recognize that I wouldn't choose it? Does that make sense? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
you have to have the experience, and in order to know you didn't like it. So I think this is just all preparation for who I'm becoming. And I'm writing my book. So I'm like, it's all part of the story. It's all part of the plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Great question.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, and just being open about your journey and um,
For sure.
all the things that the condensed version, I'm sure, of all the things that it took to get you to where you are today. So,
Sure.
to any of our listeners that have more interest in learning more about you and the work that you're doing, and I'll make sure to put this in the description, but can you please share your website and how they can connect with you?
Yes, for sure. So bravemasters with an S.com is, or JenaRodriguez.com. They both go to the same place at this moment, is the best place to connect. And I'm Jena Rodriguez on all of my social media platforms. So please connect. And I've got free resources. I've got the 14 ego tricks on my website. I've got, you can schedule a call with me if you want to learn more about my mentorship, or just have a breakthrough session. I have a free Facebook group. So there's plenty of opportunity to get into my world a little bit more, raise your consciousness and obviously become more, in tune with what you want and how to get there. And and I'm just honored to be a part of your audience and community. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, we are.
And that's it for this episode of the Entrepreneur Happy Hour podcast. If you haven't already rated and reviewed my show, leave your feedback. Do that today. Whether you're listening on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify, your review shows off your fan status and helps other future listeners find this podcast. I love hearing from my listeners, and I would love to hear from you. Send me a note at hello@theentrepreneur.happyhour.com. Until next episode, I'll see you over on the Entrepreneur Happy Hour Facebook community.